Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to my Tubecast podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on YouTube live, so I don't have to edit it. So I say, oh, it's live. And then you can watch it anytime you want, which you usually won't. And I usually go long, so you're not going to listen. So it's a perfect space to express myself. Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. Here we are. The big story is really not Iran and Israel and the U.S., although that's kind of interesting if MAGA is going to fall apart because of a misunderstanding of what America First really is. America First is like total isolationist. And now here's Trump saying, I can't be that isolationist. Hey, I got to make money everywhere. You know, I got to get the Israelis and Tehran I can be tough with. And of course, you know, Russia. It's always about Russia. You know, how does this affect my buddy Russia? So it's complicated because Trump wants to be the peacemaker, but he's coming out fairly bellicose, you know, saying, hey, you got to unconditionally surrender to Iran. And there the supreme leader, Khamenei, says, no, we're not going to do that. But because his government is unpopular, there are leaders from within who say, hey, we're willing to talk, which is kind of what the U.S. and Israel are depending on, a kind of regime change within, which would make it peaceful, because there is this unstated belief that, yes, people want a modern Iran and they want to be free of the supreme leader, Khamenei. So unclear what's going to happen there. But the rhetoric is hot, and it's even hotter amongst MAGA folks some who believe, hey, we should be totally out of this, Tucker Carlson, versus some who are a little more, more traditionally conservative, like Ted Cruz. And there was that video between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz that is sure to be a divisive element within MAGA. And I think it's going to expose how MAGA is this weird coalition between working class whites who looked at Trump as their aspirational role model in a business sense, and they'll do whatever he wants, except he's not doing what they want now, I don't think, because they're not sure. They just say, look, we don't want to spend on a forever war. So it's complicated, but it could be the fissure that brings down Trump. It's fascinating. So we'll just have to, and Trump is playing it down the middle. I don't know what I'm going to do. No one knows what I'm going to do. I don't know. He's just sounding stupid, right? I think he thinks that, I guess he thinks that's cagey. Well, they don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so that is the big story. Of course, that overshadows all the other stories. Like Senator Alex Padilla gave his speech yesterday, and that's sort of making the rounds as an item, because he talked on the Senate floor and said, hey, and his message is, if this can happen to me, it could happen to you. And of course, it's happening increasingly to Democratic politicians. The guy in New York, Lander, who's running for mayor, he got handcuffed yesterday. They handcuffed Padilla. I think what part of me? There's a part of me that thinks maybe Padilla did it because no one knows that he's a senator. I mean, that's sort of the point. And I think there's something to be said about how people acted toward him in that Kristi Noem press conference, because they didn't know who he was. They saw a big brown guy, and they went into attack mode against Padilla. But everyone has this moment. It's that moment of, I guess I don't belong. And I guess now's the time to stand up and say to the world, I do belong. And so good for Padilla, good for his career. And let's hope other people see that and say, Alex Padilla makes sense. Donald Trump makes no sense. These ICE raids make no sense. And now Donald Trump is contradicting himself left and right on the ICE thing. Anyway, so those are the stories left over from yesterday. The big story today, of course, is the Supreme Court ruling on the trans issue, the Tennessee law. Supreme Court upheld a Tennessee law banning some types of medical care, including puberty blockers and hormone therapies for transgender youth. It's clearly discriminatory. It was a 6-3 vote. The most powerful dissent was written by Sotomayor, who just was sad that the court had chosen to base this not on gender discrimination, but to base it on some kind of loose thing that said, this Roberts' decision said that it's all in flux. What's right, what's wrong, and he was going to leave it. And Roberts' decision said he was going to leave it up to politics, essentially, to democracy, to public officials. Why? I mean, medical experts, doctors, they say it's important that transgender youth get the care they need. And to deny the care they need is clearly discriminatory. But the anti-trans thing amongst MAGA and the right is real, and this is a mealy-mouthed decision by the justices to keep that in line for Trump and his MAGA types. All they said was, hey, it's not up to us. We're not doctors. Well, yeah, but they could rule on the law, which is it's a discriminatory law. It's a discriminatory law, or it's discrimination to reject this law, or rather to uphold this law. So what the Supreme Court did is they upheld a Tennessee law that bans some types of medical care, including puberty blockers and hormone therapies for transgender youth. So they just said, yeah, we'll go with the law. The politicians know best. They don't know best. The politicians know politics. They don't know medicine. And to leave it up to them is dangerous, and it's discriminatory based on gender. So, according to reports, the decision most likely will allow 24 other states with similar bans to bar some treatments for transgender youth. And this is bad because this one case gives a green light for 24 other states to say, yeah, we can restrict doctors from helping transgender minors. The court said that it believed the Tennessee law, which is similar to the other states' measures, was constitutional. In the majority opinion, the justices said it was not the court's role to judge the wisdom, fairness, or logic of the state's law. If it's not, what is? What is the Supreme Court for? I mean, that should be the Supreme Court's role. The Supreme Court wanted not to get their hands into this case because they did not want to upset Donald Trump and the right and the MAGA folks who want this law. But they should have just looked at it from a standpoint of precedence, looked at it from a standpoint of discrimination against gender, And they should have said, look, this law that bans help to trans minors, it's discriminatory on on its face. They wouldn't do it. They said it didn't want to get into scientific debate around the treatment. That should be left to the democratic process. Well, boy, the democratic process got us into this this pickle, and the Supreme Court is part of that democratic process because they are the ultimate judge to say, hey, you can't bring this law up, this discriminatory law up, and make it stick. And now you're before the Supreme Court. We're going to decide, no, you can't discriminate like this. And the court let the discriminatory law go. So other states that don't have bans currently, 25 do. The other states that don't, they may not be affected. The decision was based on the Tennessee law. So if there are other states that have a problem with it and they aren't covered by this, you can see more litigation to come, surely. But there are states that allow medical treatment for transgender youth, mostly Democratic states on the West Coast and in the Northeast, and they'll be able to continue providing such treatment. But for trans youth in those 25 states like Tennessee, you're going to be discriminated against. And this is the kind of states' rights discrimination that Trump likes. He's for states' rights when it's for him and the policies that he likes. He's against states' rights when it's against his policies. So it's inconsistent as heck. And that's why you need a Supreme Court that isn't bought and paid for, like this one. It was a 6-3 vote. Sotomayor's decision was pretty clear. She did not like it, did not like the fact that it was up to the political whims of legislators, politicians. It should be a medical decision, yeah, but all the medical groups came out and said, hey, people who need help should get help. Why are you doing this? Now, important to note that the decision did not overturn the Supreme Court's previous major ruling on transgender rights. That's where in the Bostock versus Clayton County, 6-3 decision written by conservative Neil Gorsuch, court found that a landmark civil rights law, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, shielded gay and transgender people from workplace discrimination. So workplace discrimination, there's some protection for trans people, but you don't have all your rights. If you're a minor and you're seeking medical treatment, you don't have any rights at all. Supreme Court said, leave it up to the politicians. So, some reports note that the last major decision on trans issues came June 2020. So that's important. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. But we basically have these restrictions now, and they're going to follow Tennessee. So what states are you in trouble if you're a trans person where there's a ban? Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, of course, Iowa. If you're a trans youth in Iowa, forget it. Can't get anything. Missouri, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, of course, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, where the case was centered, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and Ohio. Ohio, too. that's where there's a ban on gender transition treatments for minors. And that's been the case since 2021. There's some other states where the ban is, let's see, only surgeries are banned, New Hampshire and Arizona. But I just named all of them where they probably will follow Tennessee and say, yeah, we got a ban. It's upheld. Supreme Court said we can deny puberty blockers and hormone therapies. So that's the America we live in. Here's what Justice Sotomayor said. She said, and she compared it to like Loving versus Virginia, the 67 case that declared state laws prohibiting interracial marriage unconstitutional. She said, those laws too pose politically fraught and contested questions about race, sex, and biology. In the interracial marriage case, she wrote as an example, Virginia had argued that if the court intervened in the matter, it would find itself in a bog of conflicting scientific opinion upon the effects of interracial marriage and the desirability of preventing such alliances from the physical, biological, genetic, anthropological, cultural, psychological, and sociological point of view, which of course is total horsepucky, right? That people actually made that claim, that interracial marriage was somehow bad. But that was a view in 1967 in Loving versus Virginia, and the Supreme Court declared that law unconstitutional. And so she does, on this trans issue, clearly the court just didn't want to get involved. Leave it up to the locals. Leave it up to the politicians. And that's why, in the end, Sotomayor ended her decision, or not her decision, but her dissent, with the phrase, in sadness, I dissent. She said, usually they say respectfully, but she said, in sadness, I dissent. So 3 liberals, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor. And that's classic 6-3 of this court. And of course, Tennessee and people who support that will say, oh, we're just protecting our kids. No, you're not. You're not protecting your kids. You're denying your kids basic treatment. And they'll just have to move to another state that allows it, or where it's legal. I mean, that's what happens in this America, where it's a patchwork quilt of laws. You go to where you're allowed to do things legally. And if you live in a state that doesn't let you, that is the inconvenience of being in America during the Trump times. That empowers the Supreme Court, empowers politicians to pass these discriminatory laws. And then the Supreme Court chickens out and does nothing. Does absolutely nothing. So the Tennessee law enacted in 2023 prohibits medical providers from prescribing puberty-delaying medication, offering hormone therapy, or performing surgery to treat gender dysphoria. Well, now we just have political dysphoria, right, in America. That's what we have now. And we're going to continue to have this denial of rights for transgender people. If we don't see a stop to it, it's going to continue when we see debates about military service, athletics, bathrooms, pronouns. We know it helped Donald Trump win in November 2024. And I'm sure that's why the Supreme Court didn't want to get into it. Here's more of what Sonia Sotomayor had to say. If left untreated, gender dysphoria can lead to severe anxiety, depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, self-harm, and suicidality. So she was strong in trying to suggest how unfair and discriminatory it was to uphold the Tennessee ban, but was unsuccessful. So that's the big news today. It's sad if you know someone who is trans. You know it's not easy, but in some cases, I mean, it just means that you'll have to wait. You'll have to move somewhere. You have to wait till you're 18. You're no longer a minor. Meantime, what is your life like between the time you know that you need something and the time they deny you of the help they need because of the law? Say you're 12 years old and you know what you need, then that's 6 years of pure hell that you've been forced to live because the Supreme Court didn't have the guts to rule on the discriminatory nature of this law in Tennessee. That's America. That's America right now. All right. Hey, yesterday, show 887, I talked to Ishmael Reed. Check that out. So we talked about the SCOTUS case, talked about Iran. I want to mention something about comedy. You know, I've been doing this comedy thing. And everyone always says about when you do something, you got to question the why. Why are you doing this? Because, Emil, I mean, you know, you have a career in news. Yeah, I mean, other people I started out with, namely the guy who's sort of a honcho over there at 60 Minutes. His last name rhymes with Helly. Yeah, well, I mean, we started out at the same time in Dallas. We're in the same newsroom. But the heights for someone like him, unlimited. The heights for someone like me. So I'm turning to comedy because life is absurd. But, you know, when I do this, I'm just talking, no real punchlines. I mean, I point out things, I make you feel some things. But, you know, it's not about here's jokes, here's punchlines and that kind of thing. But when I do shows, there are generally punchlines. And it's generally in a joke form. It's all about formatics, right? Stand-up is a format thing. Just like talk radio is a format thing. The news on television or radio, it's all about format. And last night, I did an open mic over at Laughs Unlimited in Old Sac. Fun. They give you 3 minutes, which isn't even enough to scratch the itch, you know, but it's enough to like test some things. 3 minutes is a long time when you're bombing, though, and when you're not getting much feedback. I mean, there was a crowd, mostly comics, but there was like maybe 15 regular people there who could give you kind of read. That was good. I got what I needed. And then I got titters. I need more than titters. So then I went to another, not a club, a bar. And bar comedy is tough comedy. Because you may not get an audience. You may not get a good read. So last night I went to this bar. There were 3 girls sitting at a table who were non-comics, and they were trying to bribe them with like free beer. They'd have a better show. Free beer if they stayed for at least 10 comics. They stayed for 3, and then they left. And I think I was comic number 8 or 9. And I just didn't feel like staying around because that's a thing, to go to a room and there's no one there, and you have to deal with other comics, or you have to deal with the fact that there may be one person. There was one guy with a service dog. I have been in situations like, I have had those kind of hellish gigs before, and this wasn't even a paid gig. So I decided, I already had one bit of stage experience tonight. I didn't need another. So I left, came home. Rather be with my wife anyway. But I realized that I should have just, gone through with it, because it would have been interesting to see. It would have been a test. But I didn't do it. I don't really mind not having done it, but it tells me something. I got to figure out what I'm willing or not willing to do. And I wasn't willing to go up in front of just 20 comics and one member of the public to try out something, because I knew I wasn't going to get that kind of support from the 20 comics. They weren't going to give me a read. I just left. But I was in a bar enough to see the Giants play and to see Rafael Devers. Okay, they came close, 3-2. They lost to the Cleveland Guardians. But I think Devers is going to make a difference for the Giants. So, it's positive. I saw that game. And, when you're on your comic journey, you're on your comic journey. You're on your comic journey. It's your own, right? And what I'm saying is, you learn from these things, you move on, and whether you have a good crowd, a hot crowd, you learn from this experience, right? But part of me, there's a little bit of me that says, I should have just ranted. Just ranted for the 5 minutes. Anyway, that was last night, and now I'm here, and man, that trans ruling is bothersome, because when the Supreme Court is unwilling to take a stand nationally, if you're trans, you got a target on your back. And if you are an ally, now's the time to come together. And the people who are on the target. Well, we've known that since last November. That ad, remember that ad? Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. Yeah, right. He's not for all of you, just the MAGA part of you. I'm sure there's some MAGA trans people. There's got to be. But now's the time to coalesce. We know the people who are in the crosshairs. Every person of color. Because if you're a person of color, you look undocumented. Oh, well, some of the immigrants are white. They're like the Russians. Yeah, but they're not targeting them. And I would say that we're probably due for some more raids because this is the way Donald Trump plays. The tensions on Israel and Iran. Something's got to happen to pull people's attention off, change the narrative, change the story. I don't know what, but something's going to pop up. Maybe this trans thing, but I don't know. I don't think that's. I mean, that's a hot button. I think we might see more raids. But this is how Trump governs. And it's a test. It's fatiguing. It's asinine. It's a test. Tomorrow, of course, December 19th or June 19th. It's Juneteenth. And I have some Juneteenth thoughts then tomorrow. A lot of Juneteenth thoughts. Because Juneteenth, as it turns out, is a day that binds us all to each other. When you talk about our common struggle for rights, for freedom, for equality, June 19th, our federal holiday, a worthy federal holiday. And I'll share some things I wrote about Juneteenth and how it cuts across racial lines, brings us together to stand up for social justice. All right, that's it for today's show. I try to keep these about 30 minutes or so. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. I'm Emil Guillermo. We're here periodically, usually around the 2 o'clock Pacific time hour. We like to talk and talk about the news in your news talk way. It's just that unlike a lot of talk show hosts, I actually am a news guy, a news person. A lot of news talkers are, well, in radio, they're Rush Limbaugh. He was a DJ, top 40 DJ, provocateur. The late Rush Limbaugh. We'll take his name in vain. And now it's just transformed. We have podcasts now. I mean, people, news talk. What is news talk? But back tomorrow. Thank you for listening. I like to close with a little meditation. Love to all. That's what it's about. Loving kindness. I mean, that's a departure from the way talk radio was in the 90s, 2000s. It was all vitriol. I mean, that's really, I think, what began the polarization. Talk radio was all about polarization. And for a long time, it was politics leading the talk radio folks. Now it's talk radio leading the politics, where it's all about polarization. Talk radio made politics more polarized, and Rush Limbaugh, I really, he was He was the king of polarization. I know I went up against him. And other people are as good. Michael Savage. The other guy from Florida who went up against Rush. He has his Glenn Beck, the other guy. But they all use the Rush playbook, and now Donald Trump. What does Donald Trump? He uses the Rush playbook. That's why you can point to the 80s and the rise of talk radio and say that's how we got the polarization. So now we're coming in with love. And so as I wish for you, I wish for me. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Emil, Amok to you. Till next time. Mahal Kita.